All right, welcome to the Durham Co-op's first Sips and Songs event. This one is virtual. Hopefully, as we kind of navigate the tail end of the pandemic, hopefully, Jeremy and I are hopefully going to be doing a in-person live event with the same kind of feel. My name's Zach. I'm the Durham Co-op Market's beer and wine coordinator. My pronouns are he and him. If you have a question tonight, feel free to use the chat. I'll be monitoring that. As well as the raise hands function. Please keep yourself muted just so we don't get any weird feedback. And if you have a question, unmute yourself, ask your question, and Jeremy and I will do our very best to answer those for you. So tonight you're joining to drink wine, eat cheese, and hopefully learn a couple things. The cheese plates, if you picked one up from the co-op, there's come in these nice little packets that I put together over the last couple of days. We've got 3 cheeses tonight. They're kind of paired with the wines, but we purposely chose things that you can play around with. So if you end up liking the Manchego with the Albariño, then awesome. That's the whole point of pairing food and wine, is to kind of figure out what you like and experience it on your own. So without further ado, if everybody's opened the white wine, cheers. Little camera here. We're going to start off with the Albariño. We will take some breaks between the wines if you happen to need to either rinse a glass or grab a new glass. I'm surrounded by glassware right now, which is kind of precarious with the cats, but we'll make do. And yeah, if everybody wants to have a drink, I think that's always the best way to start these things. So cheers.
Cheers. Happy Friday. All right. Well,
delicious.
You got great wine, right? So I want to talk a little about why we're doing what we're doing and give you a little background. So we were doing a wines day one night, and we were talking wine, and someone, and Lynn, right? Lynn? Awesome. Lynn noticed the fiddle, violin in the background and asked if I played. And I said, no, I really just play records. Learned to play a little guitar earlier on, but I'm a DJ and have been DJing longer than I've been doing the wine business. And so we talked about an event that I did one night, which was a wine dinner, which was paired music, wine, and food. And so we kind of got off on a tangent and talked about that. And then this is sort of came up shortly after. Within the next day or two, Zach and I kind of have figured out how we were going to do this and when. So to give you an idea of why music and wine and cheese and all of these things are important, if you're in a room right now with friends, you drink with those friends. Those friends are important. The soundtrack to what your friends enjoy is also important. We spend, and I say we, and I'm talking about the hospitality industry. We spend a lot of time curating restaurant lists. When you go into a restaurant, when the world opens back up, woohoo, you don't notice the music in the background per se, but you might be tapping your fingers, stomping your feet a little bit. We are curating music to go along with the meal, with the experience, and all of that comes into play. Some restaurants pay people a lot of money to curate their playlist. And so as a DJ, that interests me right out of the gate. I worked at a wine bar in Charlotte for a couple of years, and we would toy around with the idea of what to play when. The owner was a big musician, like studio musician, one of the best I've ever heard. So we toyed with it, and on a Friday and Saturday night, we found that from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, if the tempo was up, and it was songs that they were relatable, 80s dance, 70s dance, 90s dance, people tend to drink more, quicker, and we were turning tables fast. So check averages were going up. Time at the table was shorter because people are like, yeah, this is great. I'll take another one of these drinks. Yeah, let me have two of these. Where are we going next? And so then they would go out to the dance floor, and our Friday and Saturday nights were becoming very, very kind of insanely popular because we were kind of getting this atmosphere going. And, we're not the only ones to do that. It's kind of a big thing all over the world. So to think about music and wine, we've had this wine, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play one song and prove my point, and then we're going to talk about the wine, okay? Now, for the record, every song that I'm playing, including this one, I like. But when I play this song, I want you to think about it, and I want you to have some of the wine again, right? We've all had the Albariño. It's lovely. It's beautiful. It's pretty. Now we're going to have a little Albariño with some Motorhead. Can you hear it okay? Yeah? Now try the wine again. Really try the wine. Really think about it. Do you notice that it tastes differently? Yes? No? Right? Sort of? Some of you, yeah? Who loves Motorhead? Anyone? Yeah. Motorheads are like, yeah, RIP. So glad I got to see him in concert. Really great show. Not a wine drinking guy. You got to drink whiskey with, if you're in that. So that's the point of that. And so I want to do one more thing where we listen to the next song and then we'll hear it again. I chose this guy because it's a Spanish song. We're going to fast forward a little. Now try it again. I think the point, like for me, and I'll tell you how, does it taste differently? You notice it tastes differently 3 times, right? Yeah? So for me, when we were listening to Motorhead, I really tasted the alcohol in the wine. It was hot. It almost burned a little bit. With this particular song, with this last song, it was a little bit more fruity and very silky on the finish. So this is why this sort of thing is important. Music goes with all the things, right? Whether we like Motorhead or not, I happen to love him, but when you're in a restaurant on a Friday night listening to Motorhead, you're probably not drinking a lovely glass of Albariño, right? Yeah. Does it make sense? Am I reaching here?
Yeah, you'd be the only one.
What's that?
You would be the only person drinking a glass of Albariño if you were.
Yeah. Yeah, I could almost hear Motorhead in the accent going, "What's wrong with this bloke? Like, why is he drinking Albariño? Oh, great set tonight, Motorhead. Lemmy, yeah, really good." So I think that's important to think about. So music is a big deal. And so the songs that we're going to do the rest of the night are songs that me as a DJ personally and as a wine nerd fit with the moment. It's Friday night. It's 6:15. We're gearing up a little bit. We are going to talk about music and wine, and we'll take a little break there. We'll talk about the wine maybe, and then I'll put on a little song that I think would be perfect with it. And cool. You guys can kind of, taste a little bit and taste the cheese and things like that after we kind of talk about it. Does that work?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. Great. So Albariño is a really fun little wine. It comes from Rías Baixas, and I believe Zach has some maps and all of those kind of fun things.
Yep.
So Rías Baixas is a region in north.
Spain. Yeah, right here.
Spain.
We got the map.
Yeah, right. Oh, look, right there. So if you can follow his mouth. So if you notice the part that hangs over Spain, that's called Green Spain. And so this part, it kind of goes into Galicia and into Castilla y León. And that's really the greenest part of Spain. And those wines tend to have a little bit more acid. They're prettier. We're able to have green grass and greener trees and things like that. Not saying the rest of Spain doesn't, but this is a really beautiful area. So Rías Baixas encompasses those 5 sub-DOs. And this particular wine comes from each of those 5 DOs. So you have Condado de Té, El Rosal, Sotomayor, Valdesalles, and Ribera da Ulla. And all of those make this wine, okay? And if you notice, that green part on your map is the Atlantic Ocean. Why is that important? Because if you go to the end of our map in North Carolina, that's the other end of the Atlantic Ocean. And so what does this wine go with, other than obviously the lovely plates that we have? Shellfish, seafood. Like Albariño and seafood is like a match made in heaven, because there's almost a little salinity in this wine, like almost a little of that kind of saltiness from the sea. Not quite like a muscadet, but really, really beautiful. Great acid, clean minerality, beautiful with the oiliness of a shellfish or any kind of heavier fish that way. Even like, I'm a flounder guy, white flaky fish for the win, and this wine is going to be perfect for that.
And I think it's actually funny that you just equated us to Rias Valles. There is an Albariño grown on the coast of North Carolina, which is actually pretty good. I carry it from time to time at the co-op, and it's similar. It's a little rounder because we're a little warmer. We're a little further south than Spain is, but as far as the climate, it does pretty well. Sandy soils, which are similar to what we're seeing in this area. And what Jeremy mentioned earlier, the DO is the designated origin. So it's basically saying that if it's going to be labeled Albariño, it has to be from these 5 little sub areas where people are growing grapes all over the place here, but it has to be from these 5 to be a DO. And you'll typically see like markings on your bottle. If you're at a grocery store or a wine shop and you are looking for a certain thing, looking for the certifications on the labels can help kind of guarantee that the wine is what it says is on the front of the bottle. Again, the flavor profile, I almost always get salt and stone fruit from Albariño. I think of peaches, underripe nectarines, and then there's always this nice saltiness. Talking about Motorhead earlier, it was all acid and alcohol. Like Jeremy was saying, it was quick. It was like really zippy, and didn't really remind me of that kind of like fleshiness that I kind of get in Albariño sometimes. And then when we listened to the Spanish music, it was much more paced and mellow, and the wine kind of flowed over my tongue, and I was able to actually get a little more. So I think that's really cool that that first little intro that Jeremy did. Here's some other pictures of the vineyards. Jeremy, if you want to mention anything else while we're going.
Yeah, so this is so Lagar de la Santina is it's a partnership of maybe 6 to 7 friends, and they have a winery. They're called La General de Vinos, and so they have 8 different winery or projects from about 4 different DOs, denomination origine, or denomination origins. And so their thing is authentic, varietal, money. Like they're making wine. Like I can't think of another Albariño that's this clean, that's this good at this price point. You know, they want to have these wines that are QPR, quality to price ratio, that taste like where they're supposed to be from and are varietally correct. And this wine definitely knocks that out of the park.
Yeah, it definitely is the typicity. So like this is Albariño. You could taste this with, master sommelier, and they'd be like, okay, that's Albariño. And they wouldn't necessarily, they wouldn't question where it was coming from, which is what you're kind of looking for, especially in this wine. It's also really pretty. I don't know if anybody's looked at the front label a little bit. I think that does do something for marketing. And this winemaker, he also has another project. Is that right, Jeremy?
So Christophe Chapillon is the importer here.
Okay.
And so Christophe Chapillon is part of some wines that Zach has carried for a long time since we met him. Like he came to the market really just before the pandemic, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before it was a thing. And we tasted through the lineup. So if you've had the Chapillon Cuvée Harmony at the co-op, big bottles and regular, and then the rosé. Gosh, that rosé was so lovely. And so he's from France. he's from the Loire Valley, but he married a Spanish woman, and she said, if you want to be with me, you got to move to Spain. And he said, okay, no problem. And they've been married ever since. They have 2 kids. And yeah, he makes really beautiful wine. And so everything that his name is attached to, in fact, we just got some vermouth. From his portfolio that we'll see here shortly. Lynn, you have a question?
Yeah, I just was looking at the back of the bottle and noticing that the importer is from Sausalito, California. So that's the place where they import it, right? And is that person that you're talking about connected with them then?
Great question. So USA West, which is what you see on that back label, USA Wine West LLC, is an importer known for importing smaller books. So when Christoph was looking for somebody to bring wines into the States without going to somebody like Jorge Adonis, who has a big Spanish import book, or Olay, does only Spanish wines. So, without going through those guys, he has his own company and he hires USA Wine West to put their name on the back because they're doing all of that paperwork part of it, but it's still, he's the importer. So there's a lot of wine. When you see USA Wine West on the back of the label, there's a lot of wine that comes in through those guys, but the importer is somebody different. That makes sense.
They're like a broker.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
So their job is to make sure that it's in line with TCB regulations and alcohol, and just everything is on board and that it's able to be brought into America. It typically lands in Jersey or Miami, and then is kind of trucked to the East Coast, or they go all the way to California through Panama Strait, right? And they kind of go around and then get the west side of stuff. So the Suez Canal debacle of a few months ago now, that did impact some of our wine deliveries, just because it slowed shipping down everywhere. When you think about what's in a bottle of wine, yeah, it's grapes, but you have to still get them to where you are, whether that's via boat or truck or mail or whatever it is. You still it has to get to the final consumer, which is what Jeremy is just talking about. He does a lot of stuff with Regal Wine Imports, which we have a lot of those wines at the co-op too. Again, like to your point of quality for price, I think those wines really hit that nice under 10 price point. We featured those on Wine Stays in the past. So if you want to see some other wines that Jeremy is representing, then you can visit durham.coop/winesday, and we've recorded all of those and you can rewatch and hopefully enjoy yourself. But Jeremy, I think it might be time for another song. What do you think?
Yeah. Do you want to tell them which cheese to have, or that you sort of work, and then we'll have a little sip of some wine and listen to some songs.
Sounds good. So on your cheese plates, you've got 3 of them. The charcuterie plate, which is some prosciutto and some domestically made salami from Cremonelli. And then you've got this cheese plate, which is the larger squares are called Beaufort. And we can get into the cheeses a little more once we go through them. The other round, or the square with the white rind on the outside, is called Cotton Bell, which is locally made. And then you've got some fig and chili jam in the center, so a little spicy, a little sweet. On the other plate, you've got a little thing of Kalamata olives, some membrillo, which is quince paste, and the cheese in there is called manchego. Manchego is Spanish. It's nice and salty, typically assertive. I think it's going to go really well with the red wine tonight. For the Albariño, honestly, both the Bloomy Rind, so the Cotton Bell, and the Beaufort, I think are really easy matches. Cotton Bell is from Boxcar Handmade Cheese. They're in Cedar Grove, North Carolina. It's 100% cow's milk. They typically make that during the spring, winter, and fall, and then they make what's called cotton seed, which is a goat milk blended version of the same cheese once goats start having babies in March, then so like now they've been able to get some goat milk, and so they'll kind of transition into a different cheese that we also sell at the co-op. But Cotton Belle is similar to brie, so if you can't get Cotton Belle where you live, any nice like buttery brie will do. Cotton Belle, by the description from the cheesemaker, mentions a minerality similar to shellfish. So I think that would really do well with the Albariño, especially we were just talking about, you know, shellfish and oysters and like the fattiness. The Albariño has a nice acidity to it. Also the Beaufort, so the other kind of square on the fig and chili cheese plate, is what's known as the Prince of Gruyères. So it's been aged for 14 months. It's 50% fat. The cows are a certain species called Tarentaise and Abondance, and they graze from heights of 3,000 to 10,000 feet in the Alps of the Savoie, on like basically next to France, or next to Switzerland and Germany on the really high Alps. It's a 130-pound wheel of cheese that's about 5 inches thick. So this piece is from half of the cheese if you cut it horizontally. It's got a nuttiness to it and savory. I think this and the champagne would also do really well. And these can kind of flip-flop between the white and the champagne that we'll have once we get through the red. And then the Manchego is sheep's milk, nice and salty. It's got a nuttiness to it. I think it's a little more sturdy, and we'll handle the garnacha that we're going to get into. But does anybody have any questions about the cheese? Is it delicious? All right, that's what I like to see.
All right, so the song that I'm going to play for this little pairing is it's a group that is no longer together, but they're called Groove Collective, and it's several guys and a couple of girls who do these shows, and it's very it's like amped up jazz a little bit, like we've seen them several times. I've played some of their records out and about. It's a really lovely, so think about the time that we're at too, like we're at 6:30, we're not quite ready to go in and just like start, you know, going crazy with the wine bottles and things. So we're just sort of pre-gaming and an early dinner. If, you know, like sometimes I take my kids out to eat at 6:30, I'm ready for bed after that, but you know, so we're sort of starting a Friday night here, and so keep that in mind. It's a really lovely group, and this song is called Lift Off. So enjoy some wine, enjoy some cheese. We'll come back shortly. There's no video either, just a great song.
Hello, boys and girls. I'll reach into the picture glass and let the train by. Just sit back, relax, rest in the safety belts. Lift off.
Are you ready? Are you able to lift off with us tonight? Sign me up. Are you tired? So tired of running around, getting nowhere, wishing you were somewhere else? Sign me up. Just lift off, up, up and away. Just lift off, up and away. Just lift off, up and away. Just lift off.
I'm feeling pretty good. I don't know about everybody else.
How'd that go? Yeah. So the thing about music and wine, I was having this conversation with Zach earlier. We have a young girl that works with us who's selling wine now, and she's also learning to DJ. And one of the things that I learned as an early DJ was not every song is good for every time. You know, like when I was young, 23 years ago, learning to DJ, like at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, yeah, right, woo! And nobody else was like, why are you awake? You know? So timing is everything. You know, maybe this Albariño is not for a, there's a chat in there. Maybe the Albariño works with, we feel Liftoff works better than with the wine than the previous 2 songs. Agreed.
Perfect.
Agreed. Like, you know, I think if we closed our eyes and we pictured our favorite restaurant, or, you know, somebody, it looks like you might be out on a patio, Elizabeth and Eliza. So like you're outside, this song screams, give me a palm tree, a really beautiful scenery, and, you know, great cheese and great music. And I think that's why it works. Might not be your favorite song ever, and you might not go see Groove Collective tomorrow. But you also might not buy the cheese on its own or the wine, but together it's a really magical thing. And that's what we're after. That's the goal. As a wine rep who's also an avid DJ, all I need is one person to do this. That's it. That's validation for me. And I saw a few heads bopping around, not necessarily your favorite song, not necessarily your favorite wine, but tonight it's good for all of the things. Right? Does that make sense? Word. Any questions about that? I do love that song, and I had forgotten about that song until I was digging around for the right thing. Such a great album. The whole album is really good too. If you guys like that kind of style of stuff, it's really soft. It's a great way to start the night. Are we ready for Red?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it.
Great segue.
Didn't even plan that, I promise.
Great segue.
So our second wine tonight, Love, Garnacha, also Spanish. Jeremy, when we kind of got this idea together, brought me some bottles. I tasted through them. Some of them have been added to the wine selection at the co-op. Some of them have been, you know, specifically chosen for this event. And this Garnacha is what I thought was a really great thing. The other option was a California Cab. It was a little big and rustic. I just liked the juiciness that this offers. The Manchego, I think, is going to be a really great pairing, as well as the charcuterie plate. The like meaty, salty Manchego is all sheep's milk, so it's nice and fatty. This one is what's called semi-curado. So there's a couple different versions of Manchego that you might find when you're out in the market. Josh, our cheesemonger, likes the semi-curado because it still has a little bit of creaminess to it. It's not super like waxy and kind of salty, crumbly, almost like a pecorino if you're familiar with the Italian cheese, but still similar flavors, not quite as acidic. This one has been aged from 3 to 6 months. If you see curado in the market, that means it's over 6 months old, and then viejo, so old or aged, is over 12 months. The membrillo, so the kind of rectangular slices of paste in there, is made out of quince. It's a traditional accompaniment with Manchego and with charcuterie and tapas. It's made out of quince, which is kind of halfway between an apple and a pear, that they skin and peel and then mix with a bunch of sugar. And quince is really high in natural pectin, so they just kind of cook it down into a paste, and that sweet and kind of granular texture that it has kind of offsets the Manchego's kind of salty granular texture too. So I think they go really well together. The sweetness kind of helps balance the salty. I think this wine, when we start to drink it, the sweet and the salty are really gonna kind of bring out a whole lot of flavors that we're gonna talk about. So if everybody has poured a glass of red wine, we can cheers one more time and get into the next bottle.
So full disclosure, I had this bottle pulled for tonight and couldn't wait. So I took it out 2 days ago and worked the market with it. And for those of you that can't, I know that we can all drink a bottle of wine in the night, but if you perhaps open a bottle and you don't finish it all, this wine is singing today, 3 days later after I opened it up. So for what that's worth, this is a great little wine.
Yeah.
This is a project of two guys, Arthur O'Connor and Andrew Latta. Andrew is from Washington State, and Arthur O'Connor is from Australia. He's from the Barossa and worked there as a winemaker for a long time. Excuse me. If you're familiar with Raventos, do you have Raventos on the shelf? Man, so Raventos is this, it's part of the Cordonneau family, which is like, original Cava gangster type, family, like really, really beautiful wines. And so Raventos is probably one of the most elegant and beautiful sparkling wines from the Cava area that doesn't call themselves Cava. So he was the winemaker there for 10 years, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
And then he came to the States and he was working at Artesa, big Pinot house, right?
Chardonnay. They actually do an Albariño out of California too,
Nice.
which is good, but they don't make a lot of it. So if you see Arteza or Albariño, grab a bottle. It's not as good as what we just drank, but it's good.
Location.
Exactly.
And so he's partnered up with Andrew Latta, and they're making these wines called Disruption. And so what they're doing is really, the idea is just disrupting the sort of wine nerd world, like we're going to offer great wine at great pricing from cool places. And so he was in this area in Cartagena, which if you go to the map of Spain, you'll see Cartagena, and I'm going to point to my computer like you can see it on my computer, but he's got it right there where his map is. It's up in Aragon. And so this, for what it's worth, is where Chapillon is from. And so right in that little red dot there, right in the middle, is Cartagena. And Cartagena is rugged desert-like country. And so there's a little town in Cartagena, which is kind of the capital, I guess, of Cartagena, and it's called Logroño. So the LO comes from the capital. Okay. So while he was there, he sees all of these wineries have these trailers with these little license plates on them, and they all say Logroño, and then VE, which is Vehicular Especial. So it's a license plate, hence it's a kitschy little label. And he's like, oh, love, yes, this is great. And everybody looked at him like, what? We call it Amor, like it's Amor. But so he was like, I'm going to save this for a label and figure this out. And so we're in the 6th vintage of this, or 6th version, I should say, because it's a non-vintage. It is 95% Garnacha and 5% Tempranillo. And the cool thing about Cartagena is we have a picture of this, is all of these vines are bush vines. Okay. So bush vines don't look as pretty as trellised vines. And if you go up to, go to the Albariño picture, you can see like the row. It's a real pretty row, right? There's rows in between, but bush vines, it's just, it could be our backyard full of just random bushes. And so this is also called head pruned because they kind of grow up and, you're cutting the head hair kind of thing. And so these old bush vines make this wine. It is, why does this matter in the flavor of a wine? Pretty vineyards are pretty for a reason. They're all, it's in a straight line. They all see the sun kind of the same way. They're figuring out like from one block to the other how it all works. This is just a field full of vines, and it's a little bit more rugged, and the wine feels that way, I think, in the glass. So this is, as I said, 95 Garnacha, 5% Tempranillo. It's aged 12 months in French oak, but all neutral barrels. And the best part about it is it's 80% from the 2016 vintage and 20% from the 2015 vintage. So this is technically a non-vintage wine. Oh, there we are. There's Arthur O'Connor right there. So, yeah, there you see all the information. It's 5,000 cases produced, which is a decent amount of wine, you know, in the grand scheme of things. You know, it's still a small amount. You look at some of the brands that we see in some of the other grocery stores around, you know, they're in the million case mark, you know, and this guy's, it's still a little baby comparatively. So really fun little wine. I love it. Sorry.
I do too. I like how what you were saying about the bush vines, I think really makes sense. So when you're growing grapes, you can get really high quality fruit by making the grapes struggle. And so they're only kind of putting their best foot forward because they can only make, you know, if they are struggling for water, if they're struggling for nutrients, they're basically putting all of their energy into making the best cluster of grapes versus grapes that have access to all the water and fertilizer and everything else that they could need, which are going to produce a ridiculous amount of fruit. It just is not going to have that concentration. And this wine really has that nice dark concentration to it. It's brambly. There's a lot of black fruit, blackberries, black cherries, all that kind of fun, like nice and dense and kind of chewy. You can almost kind of feel the dustiness that Aragon has, or Carnier rather. Let's see. Bring that picture back up. There we go. So like you can see all that red clay and blue skies. You know, it probably rains here, what, 5 days out of the year or something like that. And you know, the grapes are really kind of getting all they can and putting out a small amount of fruit. With this bush vine, you're also almost forced to hand harvest. There's not really a way that if you have these like pretty rows, like Jeremy was saying, that like you can have machines that walk the rows for you, gather all the grapes, and then you're producing, you know, a ridiculous amount of wine from that. There's not really an easy way to have a machine harvest fruit from these kinds of vineyards. And so even more care and even more attention is going into this bottle of wine that we're drinking.
I think it's important to note while we talk about like these lower yields, which means, you know, these older bush vines are producing less fruit. And so it's important to know, in the grand scheme of the world, Spain has more vines planted than any other country on the planet. Okay. Why does that matter? Because their production, in the ranking of production, they're like 5th or 6th. So a lot of these vines that they have planted, they have more vines planted than anybody else in the world, but their grape production is 5th or 6th in the, you know, in rank. So a lot of these vines are pushing less fruit, right? Generally speaking, and that's another reason why Spain has always been, pound for pound, a great place to buy wines. They're inexpensive. They always deliver. And that is because they're producing these old vines, and these, you know, very limited, hard to grow places are producing better fruit. You know, when you mass produce something, you're making tons and tons and tons and tons of cases. The quality's just not there. And so that's why Spain always excels.
Yeah, I agree. And there's Spain, Portugal, those places still are producing really great kind of bang for buck wines. And you know, that's one of the reasons why you kind of still see those in that sub 20 mark, is that you can get a really great bottle of wine. This honestly, like, it's kind of flip-flopped from traditional Rioja, where it has mainly Garnacha and with a little bit of Tempranillo. It's neutral French oak versus New American. But if you like Tempranillo, I think it still has some similarity to it. If you are comfortable with that, then kind of branching out into something like this, I think is a good thing. Ed, did you have a question, or Lynn? Unmute for me, please. There you go. What was your question?
Yeah, it's maybe I didn't understand you completely, Jeremy. But it seems to me that if you have the bush wines, and they produce less, but they're better wines, they would be more expensive as compared to the row of vines that are produced by machine, that are less concentrated and less good. And yet you said that the wines are a good value in Spain.
Yes, great question. So because there's more vines, by a lot, I think. So I think the number, I can't remember the exact number, but the second largest country with vines is China. And then it's France and Italy. And so, so they're miles above the amount of vines that are planted in the other great winemaking countries in the world. China, we're not really seeing much wine from them yet, and it's what we're seeing is not necessarily that great or cheap. And so they're producing a lot of wine, but it is still a little bit, and it's still great quality stuff. And honestly, the Spanish are not out for it. Nobody knows Rioja like they know Bordeaux. Nobody knows Carignana like they do the Languedoc Roussillon, or even Sonoma or Mendocino. Like Lodi happens to be a very affordable place in California, but people know Lodi, they don't know Carignana. So it is still, I think the Spanish are more realistic, almost like the South Africans. They know they can come to the market with a killer wine at a great price point, and nobody knows where it's from, and they're okay with that. Right.
So it's because they're less well known.
Yes.
Yeah, there is. I mean, obviously there's outliers. There's definitely some very, very expensive Spanish wine out there. But in general, if you're not going from a really well-known region, then you can still find value in it. That's why we're still seeing like Portuguese wines with, heritage grapes from Portugal are still very affordable, where once you get into international varietals that have name recognition, then you're seeing a bigger shift. Italy is, a super Tuscan from Italy, which is kind of a made up category in the last, 10 years, are using Cabernet Merlot, and then they're throwing some Sangiovese in there to, appeal to the masses, still be Italian, still have that little bit of kind of, Bing cherry flair to it, but are drinking more like Californian. And, when they first came to market, they were 10, 15 bucks. Now that they gained popularity, you're seeing them in the 15 to 25 range, where something like this drinks like nice full bodied. I think Lodi is a good comparison, with the exception of Zinfandel. I think this has that nice kind of juiciness to it. But it's all about like accessibility and just the general knowledge. You're really doing well if you find a Spanish wine that you love, compared to the Bordeaux's, or like Jeremy said, the Languedoc, or something that has a little more notoriety behind it. You can still find some really cool stuff, which is another reason that we chose this wine tonight. Has anybody tried the Manchego and the wine together?
How is it?
Good.
Here's hand in the back. How is it back there on the couch?
Are you talking to us?
No, Alex loved it.
Oh.
Awesome.
All right.
Shall we
Go
listen soon?
Yeah, take it away there, Jeremy.
All right. So, and again, I've got two songs that I want to play. One is, keep in mind, it's 6:49 Friday night. We're still not quite ready to jump off and do shots with, our buddies. I mean, good point.
Friday.
You're right. Depends on the buddies. So we're gonna go. We're gonna still maintain this kind of groove collective feel, and see how it goes. One of my favorite songs in the whole world.
Something that can make you do wrong.
Can you hear that okay?
Make you do right. Yeah.
Everybody know Reverend Al Green?
Love and happiness.
I mean, I can't help it.
Something going wrong. Someone's on the phone. 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. Talking about how she can make it right. Yeah. Yeah. Happiness is when you really feel good for somebody. There's nothing wrong being in love with someone. Yeah. Oh, baby. Love and happiness. Love and happiness. Oh.
All right. Now, great song, right? Everybody happy with that one? Yeah. So now we're just 10 minutes away from 7. So let's just see how we pick up the pace a little bit and see how it goes. I do love that song. Godfrey is like a new modern day, soul, like just really, really beautiful singer. And Opolopo is a pretty great remix artist who kind of took that song and made it into something a little bit more exciting that we'd hear on Friday. Yes to that song. So if you had a choice, would it be Al Green or Shauna Scoffrey? All right, so, I got to turn off the track. I'm still listening to it. So, Shauna Scoffrey, raise your hand. Second song.
Wow.
Okay, first song. Don't care. Just enjoy the wine and the cheese.
Hopefully
There
that's
was one hand I saw.
hopefully that's
I
everybody.
appreciate your honesty. Yeah. Again, like you think about, we're not really drinking this wine out on the dance floor. We're drinking this wine at a bar. We are, again, sitting down and having dinner, or we've got tunes playing while we're out on the patio hanging out with some friends. It's not something that we necessarily have to be familiar with, but it does the job. Any questions about the Garnacha? The wine is dancing. I like you ladies over there. You're dancing well. Terry? Any questions, guys?
Yeah.
No?
Cool.
All right. Well,
So hopefully a good thing. That means everything's going well. Hopefully everybody's still enjoying their cheeses. Has anybody kind of played around with eating different cheeses and drinking different wines together? Yeah. Good results, hopefully.
what's your favorite cheese with this? Sorry. What's your favorite cheese with the red? Anyone?
Bueller.
Bueller, thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
there we are.
Oh, we're having Asiago and a little goat cheese as well. We
Cool.
enjoyed some steamed shrimp with the white wine earlier. Just happened to have that. We
Yes,
whipped it out at the
yes,
last second.
yes, we had the shrimp. Yes.
Steamed shrimp? Where were we on that one?
I know, that'll be the one.
The seafood. You talked about the seafood.
Right,
Was it
right.
not- Yes,
We found
Spanish.
some shrimp.
Yes.
I just happened to have
We
some
have
in my
some
fridge
shrimp.
already cooked, so.
Nice work, lady. Before you're winning. Not that it's a competition, but you're winning.
Oh my goodness. This is delicious. I'm ordering this for my birthday.
Okay, just let me know. I know the guy.
I will say delicious.
Yeah, we're
Hey,
having a
Jack,
great
what you
time.
having at the cheese,
Yeah.
Abby?
Mac and cheese? What did you say?
What?
Mac and cheese. My son,
No mac and cheese.
I just read that Zach won't let Abby have any cheese.
It's not true. We're waiting for the champagne transition, and then she's gonna take the cheese with her. We're in different
Well,
rooms of the house.
she's selling it very different on the chat.
There's logistics involved. All right.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Majestics.
majestic logistics.
All right. That's true. All right, so everybody, we're gonna have some champagne now.
Hey,
champagne.
we have to open our bottle still. Okay.
Yep. So we're gonna actually talk about that. I've already removed the foil. There's a nice little pull tab that will happen and undo.
Can we pause right there?
Yeah.
Just in case you have one wine glass, take your Albariño, put it in your red wine, empty red wine glass, rinse it around, drink the rinse. Now you have a fresh, clean glass. Please don't rinse with water.
Yeah. You can do it, but it's not ideal.
Okay,
Nice.
carry on.
So when opening champagne, you want to remove the foil. If there's not a handy pull tab like this one has, you can use the blade of your wine opener. Kind of go around. What you want to do is in the hand that you would like to open the bottle with. You can use a towel if you'd like. Just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm not going to use a towel. You want to grip that in your dominant hand with your thumb on top. The little ring you want to pull down, and then it's 6 twists away from you. It's always 6. It's not 5. It's always 6. And then you want to kind of loosen that up a bit so you can kind of see. Then you want to transition your hand to the top, and then slowly kind of twist your cork and kind of put some back pressure on that so that the wine doesn't totally explode. And you want to you want it to whisper. You don't necessarily want a giant popping sound unless you're celebrating. Go ahead. And there you go. As far as glassware, feel free to use a regular stemmed wine glass. If you have a flute, you can use a flute. If you have a coupe, you can use a coupe. Each one offers their own kind of fun, option. The flutes typically keep the bubbles nice and tight for a little longer. The coupe gives you a wider rim, so it actually kind of helps the bubbles dissipate a little faster. It also helps you drink a little faster. So depending on what kind of night you're having, or honestly, a traditional wine glass is great for this. It has enough room to open up and really let you be able to smell the champagne as well as holding the bubbles tight. So just kind of angling that here. And there you go. This is for Abby, don't worry.
I heard she's coming to steal the cheese.
See, the magic of television, folks. All right, so when Jeremy was talking to me about what wines to do, we talked about champagne, and he had this awesome split. I don't sell a lot of splits at the co-op. They typically don't offer QPR, as we talked about earlier, because you're paying the same amount for the glass, you're paying the same amount for the box. You're basically getting half the amount of good juice because you're paying for packaging. But For things like bubbles, I think it makes a lot of sense. If you just want a nice large glass, a split will offer about 2.5 regular pours. So 3 people, 4 people can have a short pour. A nice glass. It's also an easy way to start the evening. If you wanted to, you could easily open a split of champagne and then carry on and still share a bottle with somebody and not be totally blown away. With this wine, I think both the Beaufort and the Boxcar Handmade Cheese Cotton Bell are great. Champagne and Brie are very classic pairing. The fatty, buttery quality of the Brie and the bubbles really interact very nicely, as well as the yeastiness that Champagne tends to offer. And the Beaufort with that kind of savory, I get like roasted onions and nuttiness and fruitiness to it. And the Champagne typically has that kind of brioche bread quality to it. What's really cool about this Champagne, though, is that it's what's called a grower Champagne. And yes, everybody should laud grower Champagne. There's houses called négociants. So they are basically people who buy grapes and then they make Champagne. The big houses, Veuve Clicquot, Taittinger, Bollinger, they're all like, they have a bunch of people growing grapes for them. They buy them. They still have great quality. Don't get me wrong. Champagne is still super regulated and is always like amazing. But when you get grower Champagne, this person is literally growing the grapes themselves, and you're dealing with one person and the farmer, and it's really kind of a passion project, if you will. And I'm sure Jeremy can talk a little more about it. But if you're looking for Champagne and you can see something that says grower Champagne, it's by and large going to be a much better value for what you're getting. I also just love Champagne. So if Jeremy have anything to add there.
I mean, I could talk about Champagne probably for the rest of the night and still not cover it all.
Right.
I think Champagne is really magical. And if I could afford to drink real Champagne every night, I probably would. But here's the thing, like, why is it so great? Like, we use it for one thing: celebration. It's your birthday, you got married, it's New Year's Eve, let's drink bubbles. If you take anything away from this night, remember this: stop doing that. Stop doing that. Drink bubbles because the day ends in Y. Always have a sparkling wine in your refrigerator every day. Because now Champagne is a treat, because it's expensive. If you can afford it, by all means, have Champagne in your refrigerator every day. But it's the one wine that pairs with every course. If you're going to have an appetizer, a main course, and dessert, Champagne goes with everything. Even sparkling wine goes with everything. So always have sparkling wine in your fridge. Please, 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 always do it. But make sure it's good.
If I could have figured out how the logistics of fried chicken, then that would have been in our tasting tonight. If you have any Champagne left over after this and you have some salty potato chips, especially like kettle chips, they're fantastic with Champagne. I know it's kind of, the opposites, the cheapest, greasiest, saltiest chip and the nicest wine of the night. But there is something magical that happens with the bubbles, with the aging of Champagne, which we'll talk about, and just the combination of all those things. Just kind of even the legacy of Champagne is pretty fantastic. Dom Perignon basically kind of stealing the idea from the monks down in Limoux, bringing it back to Champagne, and then really figuring out kind of how to keep those bubbles in the bottle. Madame Clicquot, which apparently there's a new documentary about the Veuve Clicquot woman who married into the Champagne family and then really basically was a master marketer and just really got that orange label into the hands of everybody. If you see Veuve on a menu, it is probably a little pricier than it would be at a grocery store, but it's always fantastic. I think I even have a bag or some swag that they do. Not to plug Costco, but Costco is pretty cheap for some Vouv as far as volume. But it's not grower champagne, which is what we're featuring tonight. So
yeah, so the difference of grower and house. I always use this example. Most of us went to college for at least a minute. Mine was maybe 2 minutes. And I had a class that was 300 people. I didn't talk to the professor one time during that class. Then I had a class with 10 people, and I had a relationship with that professor. We talked, we were able to sort of really have a focus. And I think, actually I know, grower champagne and really all winemaking is the same. If you're making 1 million cases of sparkling wine, that winemaker does not touch those bottles. But if you are a grower, chances are you and your partner are bottling, labeling, everything is under your house. I just got chills thinking about it. Like, it's a hands-on thing. Like, you have kids, really to have kids to work in the cellar and move barrels around. Your kid becomes the Riddler.
yeah. Yeah.
That's why you have kids. So, like it's a real interesting thing. It's a real hands-on approach. It is the same as Olive Garden versus Mother and Sons. They all make Italian food. It's different. Make sense? Grower champagne is that way. So, yeah, I love this wine. Bernard Gachet is a really beautiful producer. They sell off most of their fruit to these giant houses, but they keep enough to make maybe 9,000 cases total. Like, it's a pretty small production kind of place. So, oh, good. Tech sheets. So they are, it has all the things. Good.
Yes.
So this is mostly Pinot Noir. So you guys know the story about Pinot Noir and, all the grapes with white juice and how it's able to be white wine and still be a red grape. So we won't get into that. But what I think is interesting is that you see that this blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is actually aged in oak before it is made to sparkle. So that's what we call the base wine. So you start with the base wine and the sparkling wine. The base wine, really it was Jackson, Jackson is actually the winery that came up with the muzzle. So they created the muzzle, which goes on top of sparkling wine. Jackson is they're kind of between grower and house. Those guys basically, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. Sparkling wine, it doesn't matter how the grapes are grown, like you're just taking a bunch of juice that has high acid. They're sort of picked earlier for the acid, and then you make them sparkle, and the sparkle is the beautiful part. Jackson said, wait a minute. Why are we taking a base wine, something that's crappy, and making it into something beautiful? What if we made something beautiful and turned it into something amazing? So that sort of started this whole trend of really taking care of the base wine. And so these guys harvest the base wine, they mature it in oak, and they do what's called a weekly batonnage, which is the stirring of the lees. The lees are in the bottom of the barrels, and it's really like stirring your marinara sauce. It's kind of bringing up flavor into the wine on a constant basis, okay? So what you get automatically in the base wine is a real richness. Then you put it in bottle, and you crown seal it, right, which is a beer cap, okay? And then you let it sit. And for this wine, you see it was kept on the lees for 2 years. So for 2 years, and I can't show you, so for 2 years, there's wine everywhere. So for 2 years, you have this wine in bottle with the crown seal. And they used to do these hand riddles where they would come in and they would turn the bottle, boom, turn the bottle. And for 2 years, all of those lees would sort of work its way down to the end of the bottle, okay? Giving it flavor, all of that sort of yeast, we missed a step. They add liqueur de tirage, which means it's basically yeast and sugar, and the yeast eats the sugar and makes it sparkle. And so this turning of the process is sort of turning it in the bottle and bringing it all down to the cap. After 2 years, they do what's called disgorgement, where they freeze this, they pop off the crown seal, that little frozen piece out that shoots out. Then they have a wine bottle that's missing wine, and they top it off with reserve wine. So this wine, as it says in the sheet, I think it was 2016 with a little bit of 2015. So then you add dosage, which is the reserve, and a little bit of sugar. When that sort of tells us how the wine is made, like sweetness level. The wine that we have in our glass is a Brut.
Yep.
So under 10 grams. I believe the tech sheet even says 7 or 8, maybe. Maybe it's 10.
I think it says under 8. I could share it again if we need to.
So
Yeah,
this,
10 grams per liter. So,
10 grams per liter.
but that's a liter. This bottle is 375 milliliters, but a normal wine bottle is 750. So that's still like 7.5 grams per bottle of dosage.
So this is, so then they once they put the muzzle on it, and if you want to do a fun trick, take your champagne cork and put it in water and leave it, and it will become the size, it's a regular cork. They just squish it in there, and that's how it makes this little mushroom cork. So then they leave it in there and they let it sit. And I believe these guys say they let it sit for another 6 months or so before they even release it. And that means that wattle is kind of is getting in there and settling down. Why we put these muzzles on there? This wine, before we open it up, has 8 to 9 atmospheres of pressure. And I don't know if we've talked about this. Did we do a sparkling wine on our?
We did the Mirum Prosecco, but the whole thing with Prosecco is it's totally different than champagne.
So there's 8 to 9 atmospheres of pressure in this bottle before anybody know what that means? Like I didn't, I had to be like, Google, can you tell me what that means in a way that I can understand it as just a normal human? That means 85 PSI in this bottle. Your tires are 32 to 45. That's a lot of pressure. You can seriously hurt yourself opening up these bottles of wine. So then you have this lovely thing called champagne from a very specific area made by growers. And really, what are atmospheres of pressure? That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. All I can do is relate that to PSI.
Well, so the easiest way, if you were at sea level and you're standing, the pressure of the literal air above you is 1 atmosphere. So if you're standing at sea level and then you have 8 times that amount of pressure on you, then you're like living inside of a bottle of champagne right now, which would be great.
Yeah. I think of the movie Strange Brew. You remember seeing that movie where they end up in the beer tank and he drinks his way out of it? I think if I was inside of a champagne bottle, I'd be that guy. Most of you are too young to remember that movie, but early Rick Moranis. What wine people call sweet isn't the same kind of sweet to me. Why does wine have a bitter type of taste?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the wine that you're drinking. Stylistically, there are wines that are sweet. So Moscato, Brachetto, Recchiotto, like there's several wines that are specifically made to be sweet. The wines that we're tasting tonight, I wouldn't describe any of these as sweet. The Garnacha is probably the closest to a fruity wine that we've had as far as being rounder, but there's these things called tannins, which are derived from grape skins, they're derived from the stems, they're derived from the pips or the seeds of the grapes that add a bitter and astringency to wine that, I think it takes some time to kind of develop that love for, but it's another thing to think about, just like why we're doing, wine and music together. The music is adding that extra level, much like tannins kind of add texture to wine or the bitterness. And yeah, exactly. The food pairings, especially fatty things. So if you have a big, bold tannic wine, a ribeye steak is a great pairing for that because the fats kind of block the same receptors on your tongue. Same thing, cheese is fantastic with wine for that reason. Wine offers acidity, it offers, the structure of the tannins, if it's a red wine specifically, or an orange wine, which we've also talked about during wine stays. And then the fattiness of cheese will kind of help block those receptors and give you a more like rounded flavor in your mouth. And so it's really fun. That's why we're doing this. That's why we do wine stays, is to talk about all these fun things. So thank you for your question, Deborah.
So, excuse me, Tim asked about malolactic fermentation.
Uh-huh.
Malolactic fermentation is deceiving because it's not actually a fermentation. It's a transfer of malic acid into lactic acid. And with white wines, you can choose. Red wines all go through malolactic fermentation. Rosés also kind of the same, you can choose. The best way to taste malolactic fermentation is in Chardonnay.
Yeah.
When a Chardonnay goes through full malo, you get a real buttery and creamy, it's going to lactic acid. So it has this sort of butter and creamy sensation. You can feel it in Chardonnay. I mean, there's some Chardonnays, when you put it in New French Oak in full malo, it tastes like Orville Redenbacher made it.
Yeah.
Full on butter popcorn, butter. And so that's malolactic fermentation.
Yeah, malic acid is similar to like green apple. So if you think of a Granny Smith and you take a bite of Granny Smith apple, you've got that really kind of sharp acidity to it. And then you're converting that into, like what Jeremy just said, butter, butterscotch, caramel, toasty kind of things. So it can really change, at the co-op, we don't have a lot of buttery Chardonnays. Our market is a little more acid driven. So you'll see more Sauvignon Blanc, you'll see more Albariño, Muscadet, or unoaked Chardonnay, but we do have a couple that live on the shelf. If you want those big butter bombs, we can definitely take care of you.
So another thing to think about is that this is a Brut, and a lot of us have had Prosecco in our life, maybe even earlier today, maybe later tonight. Most of the Prosecco that we have is called extra dry, which is actually sort of false advertising. It's actually sweeter than Brut. So it's tricky because we generally talk dry but drink sweet. We hate Riesling. Like if this was a Riesling tasting, it would just be Zach and I probably. And maybe Abby could actually be downstairs.
Sounds like hate, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm into it. I've got a lot of Riesling over here. I'm ready. But not everybody gets into that. So, we don't like sweet wine, but then we drink things like Prosecco, which tend to have about 16 grams per liter, which is a lot of sugar. We tend to drink bigger reds, which tend to have a little bit of RS. And so we also drink a lot of Diet Coke. We put ketchup on everything, sugar. So, it's tricky. When you have a wine like this is something that is not for everyone. If you're from the South, born and raised, I am, this is biscuits in a glass. If you can smell the yeast, you can smell the bread, you can smell the dough. Now it's Pinot Noir, so it tends to be more bready than it does. Like if it was Blanc de Blanc, you would smell biscuits, like fresh biscuits. This has a real bread quality, and the sugar and sweetness is where I was going with this. Sweetness is really in the eyes of the palate of the taster. I try to stay away from sweet comments because sweet to me is different than sweet to you. Sweet is relative. Everybody's palate to sugar is so different. Yeah. So things that are like absolutely sickeningly sweet to me, they might be not enough sweetness for you. And so, but this wine I think has a little bit of that kind of bread quality, and bread does have a bit of sugar in it. Obviously, if you eat a lot of bread, there's sugar in there. And so there is a little bit of that kind of sensation to it, but it also finishes very acidic, leaves you salivating. And that's the good trick of all wine. Wine that has acid is what goes well with food. It makes you want to take another sip. It makes you want to take another bite.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep.
Back to Rieslings, before we knock it too much, there's a whole range of Rieslings, all the way from sweet to quite dry, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Riesling is one of the best grapes ever in the world. I would say Gruner is probably my favorite. Sugar is not on the playlist, but it could be. Riesling is the greatest grape out there besides Gruner for me, but it ages better than most wines because of the versatility of it. Yeah, I'll never knock Riesling. No way.
And then back to the Champagne, where's the region this is from in France, which is quite specific, as I recall.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
actually, we have a map we can show real quick. Let's see.
So inside Champagne, so you see Champagne is this whole area here. Now, these guys are located just above the Côte de Bar and the Aube is how you say that, I think. My French is limited to bottles and the Spanish that I took most of my life. But, you know, so you see Côte Blanc. Côte Blanc literally means, you know, it is basically white wine. That's where Chardonnay is king. In the Côte de Bar, you see a lot of Pinot Noir down here. And Montagne de Reims, I think you have to say it with a little bit more phlegm.
You do.
That's, you know, this is, yeah. So that's really, it's really beautiful wine up here. In the Vallée de Marne, you have Cremant. Cremant is all Grand Cru. Everything in Cremant is Grand Cru Chardonnay. So it's on the cusp of Marne and the Côte Blanc. But these guys are down here in the Aube. So technically in Champagne, but not necessarily a cru at all.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Lynn.
have a question. I have always wondered what the Grand Cru is. Is that the best of the vineyards? Is that the best of the wine? What does that signify?
Grand Cru and Premier Cru are the two.
For Champagne.
Things. Yeah. Grand Cru is better than Premier Cru in Champagne. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
It's funny because in Bordeaux,
It flipped.
they're all different. Yeah. So that basically means that that particular vineyard, that area, they have decided, and they are the powers that be within Champagne. And it's like, I think it's the INAO of France that sort of decides all of that. And I can't tell you what that's for, but they're basically like the governing body of the AOC in France. And so Grand Cru means that that particular village and that particular vineyard, everybody agrees that that's the best place to buy wine in that area. Or
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you'll see Grand Cru, you'll see Premier Cru, or it'll be a 1, like the numeral 1 ER. Those are, and depending on what region of France that it's from, that kind of gives you that level that Jeremy was just talking about. The AOC he was just mentioning is very similar to the DO that we found on the back of our Albariño bottle. And there's, each country has a little bit of different like nomenclature for it. So you'll see DOC in Italy, you'll see DOCG, which is basically even smaller of a region. Kind of, think of wine and then Premier Cru and then Grand Cru. Think of, Italian wine, think of DOC, think of DOCG. And each country is a little different, although they're slowly getting to actual, I guess, normalcy on their rules, but it's something that it still changes. There's some really great websites out there. If you want some like quick information, a website that I use frequently is called Wine Folly, which is very easy and very well written, and she kind of breaks things down in a way that is easy to understand. So if you are trying to learn more about wine, you don't want to invest in 25 or 30 books like I personally have, then Wine Folly is a really easy resource.
So DOG would be Domaine d'Origine and then Grand?
That it's Italian, so it's Domination,
Okay.
Origin, Control, Guarantee. If you were to Englishify it, which is a real word. So it depends country to country. Typically in France, you'll see AOC. It used to be AOP, but then they switched systems. You'll see AOC on cheeses as well. So the Beaufort that's in the tasting box tonight is an AOC cheese. So they guarantee that it's, like I was mentioning, it's, from 2 breeds of cow, from Savoie, unpasteurized, cooked curd, copper vat, natural rind, rubbed for 35 days. And, there's all these little things that go into kind of qualifying that this is what the label says. And there's literal laws behind it. and you're definitely see that in wines too. You know, Burgundies, Champagne, Bordeaux, definitely more French wines because they kind of started the whole thing, which is why we have, you know, when you think of international grape varieties, you typically are thinking of French varieties because they were kind of first to kind of market, if you will. And then, you know, our palates have then, you know, evolved over the last 400 years to really kind of latch onto those things. The Manchego we have is a DOC. It might even be DOCG. I haven't seen there's typically a little like holographic seal on the full wheel of cheese. But it's, you know, hand in hand. It's basically guaranteeing, like, if you call something Manchego, it is sheep's milk from Spain, from La Mancha sheep. If you call something Gruyere, it's cow's milk from Switzerland. Same thing with the Albariño. It's going to be Albariño grapes. It's from Reyes Valles. It's, you know, like all of these kind of things.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy, I haven't heard any music. I've never heard any music. To go with the champagne, and not to give away our age, we haven't heard any Mozart tonight.
You're right. I could, you know, I was just sort of thinking, like, what is it? Am I going to pull an audible? Like, I pulled some songs up. You know, champagne is something that we most of the time we celebrate too. So, you know, it's a wedding, it's an anniversary, I got a job promotion. But honestly, like, I love that you guys are giving away animals on the chat here. You know, I think that champagne, like, we're at 7:30 on a Friday night. We should have a little bit of fun. We should be feeling, you know, ready to do something. We've been doing this now for an hour and a half. I'm ready to finish the wine, finish the food, and let's go out, or let's go have a shot or something. I actually have to go hang out with, you know, watch movies with the kids. So it's going to be, you know, winding down. But nevertheless, champagne, what does that mean to me as far as music? Well, first of all, I think that I'm an old DJ, so I have to go with the jams that are going to play us and make us move. And champagne makes us think about, what's the quote? I think it says, Bordeaux makes us think about bad things. Burgundy makes us talk about them. Champagne makes us do them.
Then that should be the quote.
Yeah. I mean, think of all the things after you have champagne, you're like, we should do this. So this really, you know, in the celebration spirit, and I'm sorry that I'm not going to put any Mozart on tonight, but it's hard not to have a little disco and some champagne. So you guys know Nile Rodgers, he's the brain behind So I'm gonna take it in one other direction, in that it's important to experience all the things. And so Zach actually turned me on to these guys, and I'm really kind of enjoying all of it. You know, towards the end of everybody's night is differently. You know, a great way to finish a dinner is through bubbles. And a great way to kind of relax into the next step, which might be coffee for some, or, you know, cuddles on a couch, whatever. You need something a little bit on the easy side too. And this is a really cool song that Zach turned me on to.
So this song, how I discovered it, Abby and I were on vacation back in March, and we were on a ferry, and this was the song that played while you're on the ferry going from island to island. This was your travel music, and it, you know, thanks to Shazam, And then obviously to Jeremy for putting all this together for us.
You know, this is another sign that champagne can be the party music, but it can also be the I'm ready to just chill music. And you know, it is versatile. It is the most versatile food wine. It is probably the most versatile music wine as well.
Yeah.
That's a good song. Thanks for turning me on to these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that fare? Which one do you prefer? Anyone? Bueller? Number one.
Oh, okay.
Number two. Number one. Number two. I like it. Number two. Number two. Number two. I like it.
Number
I
3.
like it. Number two. You guys should check out Bonobo too. Number 3. Who's going in number 3?
We haven't gotten there yet.
Wait, does that mean there's another song coming? Like, you know, I think we can talk about the importance of hip hop in Champagne. And I almost put some Jay-Z on the playlist. You know, Jay-Z sort of revolutionized Champagne in an interesting time. He was drinking a lot of Cristal, and the owner of Cristal said something really negative about him, and he basically took an entire culture and said, we don't need your champagne, we can drink other things, you know. And hip hop, yeah, there you go, I like that, Terry, thank you. You know, I think it's important to recognize how important music is into the wine world. You know, you look at Sideways, the movie that really ruined Merlot, and amped up Pinot Noir, and then you have hip hop artists that talk about Cristal or even Moscato, who is somebody's got a Moscato out. She raps about it, and it like changed the world. Nicki Minaj?
Yep, she has. It'll be at the co-op soon, actually. Nicki Minaj has a Moscato. Raekwon has a Lambrusco that we also carry. Snoop Dogg has a California Red Blend that we also carry. I am a fan of hip hop, as you would say. So we do have quite a few wines that are influenced by hip hop artists, R&B rappers. So it's definitely a thing. And I think, like you were saying, the fact that Cristal kind of badmouthed Jay-Z, and then we get this other amazing wine that is not at the co-op because it is a little expensive. I can special order it for you if you'd like, but it's not going to live on the shelves.
So one of the things that the first time I did this sort of pairing, we played an album that was all samples, all original. It was so the samples from Wu-Tang, it was the original tracks that they sampled from. And it's all this sort of, I mean, it's a great record. And I have it on vinyl, I don't have it in digitally. So when we do this in person, I'll play that album, and it's all this great 70s and soul music. And you're like, oh yeah, I know that song. Oh yeah, I know that song. Or I know that sample, it's in this or in that. And so hip hop is a big thing to sort of move the world around as far as music. I like older hip hop. I struggle with the new things that are on the radio. But I do want to play one song for you while we sort of have a little bit of this. Speaking of hip hop, it's a French female group called Zap Mama. And this song is from 2007, 2008. The Roots discovered them. And if you watch Jimmy Fallon, you know the Roots and Questlove are a big powerhouse in the music world. So I want to share this one, have a little champagne while you have this. I have to run to the restroom, and then we'll come back and we'll talk more. Does that work?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, cool.
Cittoyen story. When you're with friends, no need to hurry. No more rush, no more haste, no more. When you're with friends, no need to hurry. No more rush, no more haste, no more. No. Nili patara fiki, natenara fiki abakie. Nili patara fiki.
How'd that go?
I think that was good.
Yeah,
We're getting a lot of thumbs up on that one.
I love that track. How did that work? Yes? I love that song. I love Champagne. Yeah, I'll tell you, I found that. I worked at a record store 1,000 years ago, and I found that on a single. Remember those things? That's showing my age. You know, the singles on the cassette tapes. And I couldn't find it on vinyl to save my life. And then I came across it maybe 2 years later. A DJ friend of mine got all this promotional vinyl. And I could probably pull it up if I could find my hip hop in here. But he actually had it. And I was like, oh, and he gave it to me. And I was like, yes, I'll take it. I'll take it. Really, really great record. All of their stuff is really good. But yeah, thanks for humoring me, guys.
Wow. All right. Anybody have any other questions about Champagne? No? All right. Jeremy, do you have any other songs for us or anything like that?
Well, you know, so you guys have a link, or he's going to send you a link.
Yeah.
So I will set you up with this link and explain it. So as a DJ, I'm not a turntablist. You know, I don't do a lot of scratching. I don't do a lot of tricks and throw records around and do that. I'm really sort of blending things together. So the idea from my standpoint is to go from point A to point B and have a lot of things in the middle. And you don't really notice the change until you hear the new song. The new vocal. It's very similar to making wine. When you have lots of different things, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and you're blending these things together, you want to be able to experience all of it seamlessly. And so it's tricky to, you know, my job as a DJ, whether it's a 30-minute set or 7 or 8 hours, is to entertain the masses as we do this. So the set that you're going to hear tonight, if you choose to click on it, I actually played Saturday for a group of women in Emerald Isle. They're called the UUA, which stands for Used Uterus Association. And so it's a group of about 60 women who have had children, and they get together. This is their 27th year, and they get together every weekend before Mother's Day when their families take care of them, and they kick everybody out, and they have this huge party. And so this year I DJ'd for them about 8.5 hours. It was a very long day, and it was very entertaining. And there was me and 2 other guys there who are the bartenders, who they generally sort of, you know, accost all night long. And the ages range from 30 to 70, 80, and they have a big time, and they drink and they dance all night long. So this is an hour excerpt of that. It is a combination of all types of things. It starts with Spandau Ballet, True, a remix of that. There's Bruno Mars. There's Florida or Florida. There's Will Smith. There's the Spinners. There's Boz Scaggs. There's all the things that we know and love sort of put together in a way that you're like, huh, I didn't hear that one coming. You know, even a little In Vogue, if for those of you that are old enough to remember In Vogue. It's a really great mix, and it's fun. And the idea now is to put that on if you want and listen to sort of the journey, dance around, hang out, drink with your friends, and enjoy the show. It's a journey from beginning to end. That's how it works.
So in the chat, the link that is the soundcloud.com. That is the music that Jeremy is currently talking about. The second link that I shared, the YouTube, is the playlist of tonight. So it's all of the songs that Jeremy compiled for us to listen to. So if you want to listen to them one by one again, that is the playlist. The SoundCloud is the big mix. So if you want to continue the party after we close the Zoom, go ahead and click on that link. I also included my email address. So if you need me to email it to you, it's Zach, Z-A-C, at durham.coop, C-O-O-P, no.com or anything. We're nice and easy. So shoot me an email, especially if you have questions about the wine as well. That's the easiest way to get in contact with me. Did you have a question?
Yes. Zach, no questions, just ordering. I'm going to order.
Okay, shoot me an email, Marina.
Perfect. Beautiful evening. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
We asked a question about drinking different types of wine in the same night. Yeah, you know, it's a thing. But you have to sort of make the journey within your palate. You know, like if you start big, you have to go small at the end. You can't go big and up. You know, it is a journey. It's just like a song, just like your soundtrack, as we talk about it. You start off easy. You know, if you start with all the hits, you know, like at 6 o'clock, by midnight, you're on to like the really song, you're crying yourself to sleep with some really ballads, you know, like you got to work the journey. So as you're drinking, try drinking, you know, a glass of this, a glass of that, a glass of this, and then you're, you know, on your way out. And if that doesn't work, just drink, you know, 2 bottles of what you like.
Lynn, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Zach and Jeremy. It was just super to have the music included and the wines and the explanations. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Abby had another, do you think the different tastes are affected by how long you hold the wine in your mouth? Yes. Yeah. You know, so we have, first of all, in tasting wine without music, we all know we have taste buds all over our mouth, right? So if you swirl the wine and swish it around like it's Listerine, it tastes differently than if you just take the shot. One of the examples that I give people is, you know, I drink the wine and I do this noise, and then, you know, it becomes great. One thing that you don't do is that with Jaeger. God, I used to love Jaeger in college, and then I started drinking wine, and then I had a shot of Jaeger, and of course I took Jaeger and went and swished it around. That's not what Jaeger's for. Jaeger's a shot. So wine is, you want to experience it all over the palate. So yeah, so swish it around, play with it, make the noise, do all the things. And does it change with the beat? You know, that's a great question. I generally don't drink when I DJ because I have to DJ. But yeah, I would imagine, and I don't drink on the dance floor either because yeah, people will get in my way and I'll spill all the wine. But try it and see. We're in our living room. Tonight is the night, so give it a shot.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Thank you for the number 3.
Right.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, it was lovely. It introduced me to someone new, and thank you for that.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. If nothing else, we've had some fun, learned a little bit maybe, and you heard something that hopefully wasn't too annoying, music-wise. I know my voice is.
All right. No, I think we did a great job. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Another shout out, Elizabeth. She is the person who did all of the graphics for our event. So if you ever see anything graphic related at the co-op, she's the person who did it. So all of the signs, all of the cool little slips on top of your cheese plate, if you got one from us, it's all Elizabeth. So thank you very much for doing that. And thank you everybody for joining us. We do a similar event, not quite as amazing as tonight. I have to be unfortunately honest, but every other Wednesday from 5:30 to 6:30, we talk about a couple of wines. People like Jeremy join, and we kind of do a miniature deep dive into wines that are on the shelves of the co-op. So if you have questions there, it's a great time to join if you want to ask Otherwise, we record and we post them on the website about 3 days after the fact. And that way you can kind of, revisit at your own leisure. I will send, if anybody does want to email me, please do, and I can send you the 2 links for the YouTube playlist and the continual playlist that Jeremy sent out. And this will be posted on the co-op's website early next week. Again, that's an Elizabeth task, so it's all her fault, and we appreciate her very much. So if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we will see you at the next Wednesday and maybe the next Sips and Songs on the patio of the co-op. Who knows? We're taking it day by day here still. So thank you again. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. One more shout out for myself. Happy Mother's Day to my mom, Terry, and her friends, Marina, and I don't remember your other friend's name, but thank you for joining. And all the other moms out there, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody next Wednesday for Wednesday.